Hiya folks, Carl James here from Electric Media Madness, joining me for another episode of Strange Tales. Today I want to talk a little bit about Star Wars and the origins of the Star Wars story. There's a number of people out there who have discussed the idea of where George Lucas actually got his inspiration for Star Wars from. A number of people have suggested that George Lucas had an interest in alternative knowledge, various aspects of secret history and things like that, and he metaphorically alluded to these ideas in the Star Wars stories. Now, in alternative knowledge research circles, one subject that often crops up is this idea that George Lucas cribbed from the history of Freemasonry in the Star Wars films. There's even been some claims that George Lucas was, or maybe still is, a Freemason. Unfortunately, that claim is based largely on what would have been his corporate status and occasionally some odd gestures that he's made when he's been out in public at various events and things like that. I would never say that George Lucas isn't a Freemason. It may well be the case that he was, still is. There's currently no way of evidentially knowing. But there is, however, some circumstantial evidence to suggest that he's interested in the subject, and he incorporated this idea of the history of Freemasonry into the overarching Star Wars narrative of the first 6 films, episodes 1 to 6 anyway. And specifically, we'll see with something that happens in episode 3. Several things that happen in episode 3 actually. Revenge of the Sith, Star Wars episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And the key event in that film is Order 66. And as those fans of Star Wars will know, that Order 66 was a major turning point in the overall story arc of the franchise. It was an order given by Darth Sidious, also aka Emperor Palpatine, to execute all of the Jedi across the whole galaxy, allowing the Empire to fully realise itself and for the Sith to rise to power. This was engineered by a countless number of clones which were bred to use as soldiers for the Republic to support the war that Palpatine had brought about. The clones were used to execute the Jedi once the war had ended. And then Palpatine used the overall threat of what had happened as a result of the war to bring about the Galactic Empire. So in order to see the parallels between that specific part of that story and the overarching story of Star Wars to Freemasonry, we have to look at this, what's called amongst alternative knowledge circles, this 800-year time frame to do with Freemasonry. And it is interesting that we get a sort of a quasi 800-year time frame in Star Wars as well, when Yoda says for 800 years have I trained Jedi. It's sort of correcting this idea that Yoda has been around for that time, and we have this 800-year time frame for Freemasonry as well. So let's go back in time to the infamous Knights Templar and draw some comparisons between the Knights Templar and various characters and entities and things like that in Star Wars. The Templars were not only an order of skilled warriors, but they were also a band of religious and scholastic monks. And like the Jedi, the Templars took an oath of poverty and obedience and chastity, and they were forbidden from pursuing any romantic or sexual relations. In the case of the Templars, they weren't even allowed to casually interact with women. Both the Jedi and Templar initiates had to face trials in their training, like the Jedi's allegiance to the Chancellor of the Republic, Palpatine. The Templars followed the orders of the Catholic Pope, and in that regard I find it quite interesting because there is a synchronicity between the terms Palpatine and papacy, as in the Catholic Church. October of 1307, so we have this roughly 800-year time frame, and the Templars were faced with their version of Order 66 because the Templars were arrested throughout France, and it was decreed that all of the Templars were to be crushed everywhere within the Catholic Empire. And those that the Templars had sworn to protect, in this case it was Pope Clement V, and he was working in tandem with, I think it was French King Philippe le Bel, and they turned against them. And the Templars were hunted down, they were imprisoned, they were executed, and again, like the ill-fated Jedi in Star Wars, the Templars that remained, they went underground, they went into hiding, and they hid away from what had happened to them in secret. And in some fashion, the Templars are almost painted romantically in history. There's a sort of a romanticism to them, but the reality was somewhat different because the Templars, despite pledging allegiance to the papacy, they had all manner of beliefs and loyalties to principalities far and wide across the world. And this was quite beneficial to those that escaped the purge because it afforded them the opportunity to create a secret network of allies and things like that. Ultimately allowed them to find sanctuary amongst both Christian and Muslim faiths. But despite their apparent safety, they opted to protect their beliefs and values under a shroud of secrecy. And this is where Freemasonry becomes involved, because they had safe houses that were known as lodges. They kind of ingratiated themselves within the political affairs of numerous countries and numerous states at the time. And depending upon how much stock you put in these ideas, there are claims that there was efforts to overthrow various kings of Bavaria and Prussia, influencing the outcome of the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution as well. That was another claim that was made about this arrangement between what remained of the Knights Templar and their involvement with the Freemasons. So within the Star Wars narrative framework, you can see the Order of the Jedi rejected by their protectorates, rejected by the Republic, hunted, then killed. We also see the remaining few hidden Jedis, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda, and eventually Luke Skywalker as well, I suppose, inspiring and aiding various causes throughout the galaxy, the rebellion, similarities between the historical accounts, revolutions and all that kind of thing. So both fictional lore of Star Wars and historical lore. There is a belief that Freemasonry split into the Scottish Rite and the York Rite, and I can't remember which way around it was, but I assume it's the Scottish Rite. The Scottish Rite were mainly sort of settled in Scotland, and I think it was the York Rite was established itself in sort of North Africa, Greece sort of type region of the world. And it's interesting that you have the two principal survivors of Order 66, which is Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda goes to this sort of grassy, sort of tree, marshy, swampy sort of planet Dagobah, which I suppose is sort of slightly comparable to Scotland. And then Obi-Wan Kenobi goes to the desert planet, into the desert, which is comparable to sort of regions of North Africa, and that were seemingly where they were this order. So we have another sort of synchronicity there with that. So it's not really hard to see these similarities between the historical record, historical accounts, and the fictional lore. I should note that all the aforementioned comparisons made in this video are based on more mainstream and official narratives regarding the history of the Knights Templar. In fact, there are many aspects of their history that diverge from the so-called official narrative and are worth taking the time to look into. One recommendation I can make here is the work of Chris Hampton from Wolf Clan Media. He has a highly detailed and fascinating video entitled Switzerland, Ancient Knights Templar and Hidden Treasures, available to watch on his various platforms. His YouTube channel now goes by the name of Open Cage Media. If you're looking for the video there, please take the time to check out his content and support his work. Now let's get back to Star Wars. As people who watch this channel will know, I am a huge fan of science fiction and that kind of thing, whether that be literary or in movies and television and things like that. And I know of few science fiction narratives where something has been cribbed as a source of inspiration for its story. In actually quite a blatant way, there are so many parallels between the Purge of the Templars and the Purge of the Jedi in Star Wars. That kind of leads into this idea of how much George Lucas really knew. And one of the things that comes out of Freemasonry is this idea of the great mysteries, the secret teachings, the secret schools, the mystery schools, all this kind of thing. And some people call it occult, some people call it ritual magic and things like that as well. The key thing that happens in Revenge of the Sith to initiate the Purge is, the aforementioned Order 66. And it's the Order 66 paradigm itself, because Revenge of the Sith is structured around and littered with allusions to 666. Now, whatever you might make of 666, it has power within occult belief systems and things like that. Some people say it's not the practice, it's the intent behind it with these things. So, people say it's the sign of the beast and all that kind of thing. I'm not going to get into any of that here, but I just think it means something to people. And it has power to some people and to some groups. That's really all I want to say on that matter at this point in time. So Order 66, if we add up the numerical value of the letters, and people say, oh, what are you doing? You're stretching with this one. But so we have the word order, O being 15, R being 18, D being 4, E being 5, and R being 18. Yeah, so if we add them up, we have a total of 60. And 0 means nothing. We'll leave the O out. So we have 6, and then you have the number 66, Order 6, and 66, we have 666 there. So you have these two sections in the film, respectively good and evil halves to the Anakin Skywalker character. The first half of the film, he's played as good, although there's questionable aspects to that, but largely he's played as good. And then obviously the second half of the film, we're going down to into the the dark path, the evil kind of thing. And there's this cinematic bridge or grace period in the right smack bang in the middle of the film between those two sections. It only lasts a few minutes. And Anakin is looking across the Coruscant skyline, city skyline, searching for his love Padme, and metaphorically, he's searching for his moral compass, which is Padme. And it's a brief transitory period before his decision to embrace the dark side of the Force. Those two sections they appear for, if I remember right, I think it's 66 minutes and 6 seconds. So we have another, basically a 666 there. Based on the transitional narrative and dialogue at that point, the markers of that point of the film, the first section of that part of the film concludes when Anakin learns that Palpatine is a Sith Lord, bearing in mind that Palpatine is the initiator of Order 66 and all the aforementioned. We discussed the Purge. And the second section begins with Palpatine revealing his true nature to the Jedi, Mace Windu specifically, and others. They attempt to seize him. And Anakin makes his choice to join Palpatine. And there, the dialogue spoken by Palpatine is close to the conclusion of the first half of that film. So I'm going to put some emphasis on certain words here. I'm going to read out some of the dialogue from the film here, so you'll know my emphasis when I do this. So, Anakin, if one is to understand the great mystery, one must study all aspects, not just the dogmatic, narrow view of the Jedi. If you wish to become a complete and wise leader, you must embrace a larger view of the Force. So this is precisely 60 minutes and 60 seconds, 61 minutes, I should say, into the film. Palpatine uses the word the Great Mystery. And that's something that's used so much in Freemasonry, the Great Mystery. We have 60 minutes and 66 seconds, 61 minutes and 6 seconds. He says, you must embrace a larger view. So given the extensive allegorical allusions to secret societies, hidden knowledge, ancient belief systems and all that kind of thing that's in Star Wars, I suspect that the Great Mystery here, referred to in the dialogue, it's an allusion to the mystery school teachings that's associated with Freemasonry and the occult. So we have to ask the question then, is the 666 motive there? Is it there to warn the viewer that such beliefs are perhaps evil or misguided or something like that? Or is that a red herring designed to mislead the viewer? And of course, the most telling line of dialogue in that is, you must embrace a larger view. And Lucas would have undoubtedly overseen, well, he did, we know, there's many documentaries out there, he would have overseen the specific inclusion of those kinds of references in the film. And you have to wonder what it was that he was trying to convey. Now, I'm fascinated in these. I don't have any belief systems of my own at all. I'm not religious. I'm interested in spirituality. I'm interested in belief systems. I've read most main historical sort of religious texts and things like that at some point in my life. I'm fascinated by them all. I'm fascinated by the parallels with the saviour figure, how it seems to be apparent in all religions. Even before that, if you go way back to star worship and things like that, ancient peoples that just worshipped, deified the stars in the sky and things like astronomical anomalies. There just seemed to be that parallel of that. And don't forget that Anakin was, in the story, is the boy conceived of no father. You know, he was conceived by the Force, which is the Christ narrative, you know, as well. And that's quite common in a lot of Hollywood films. But anyway, I digress anyway for that. Because, so people say that you know, it's got to be sort of one or the other. It's got to be black and white. And I've heard that said about people like Kubrick as well. Some people have said, I know Kubrick, you know, even though he's put this stuff in his films, he was part of the industry. He wasn't trying to do anything profound. He wasn't trying to, you know, he was just sort of like, I don't know, almost like voyeuristically putting the stuff in there, but he didn't really have any kind of moral compass about it. I sit on the other side of that argument. I think he did. People might question that when you look at characters like Alex in The Clockwork Orange and all that kind of thing. And I suppose you could say that about Anakin as well, because what he does, essentially, he is the hero of the film, of those first 3 films, episodes 1 to 3. But he slaughters so many, you know, the younglings as well and all that. He slaughters so many people. And obviously he becomes Darth Vader, who then goes on to kill even more people, countless numbers of people. But then in Return of the Jedi at the end, when you have the redemption via Luke Skywalker and that, people are expected as the viewer to feel sorry for Darth Vader and by extension Anakin Skywalker. So people said, oh, mixed messages here and that, but a lot of people do that. They see these characters, the anti-hero or whatever in Hollywood, and they're saying it's creating it's portraying a negative idea, repainted as something positive, really. But it's difficult to explain. What we need to do oftentimes when we watch these things is separate our feelings and the character from the message. What he's being almost subliminally being portrayed here. We, as the average Joe Blogs viewing audience, you know, we're oftentimes ill-equipped to, certainly when you just watch something for the very first time, there's a lot of things that we don't pick up on. We're ill-equipped for that. And it's the same with knowledge, you know, the power of knowledge. It can easily get out of control. Knowledge, the masses, the masses, they're denied by the hidden rulers of the world. And that's oftentimes one of the claims that's made about Freemasonry, is that that is being kept away, you know, and that is true in the respect that there is an incredible amount of secrecy involved with Freemasonry. It is a secret society. The oaths that they keep, the initiations of that, it's all done behind closed doors. There is a lot of secrecy there. My argument has always been, well, if you've got nothing to hide, why does it need to be secret? If we try to be generous about this and say there's a possibility that George Lucas was alluding to signs of evil within the film, that he wasn't doing the bog standard thing in Hollywood where he's just, it's like the predictive programming type things and acclimatization and desensitized to these things, that he's actually might be doing a very sort of watered down version of what Kubrick did with his films, where he's subtly trying to portray these messages in Revenge of the Sith. But ultimately, I will leave you to your own conclusions. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please like, share, subscribe. If you can, that would be wonderful. Would really, truly appreciate it. If you're interested in my alternative knowledge research, my books are available from Amazon and Lulu Publishing. The links are in the description for this video. And I will see you again very, very soon. Bye-bye for now.